For this pre-analysis guide for Topaz, I'll be giving you her best relic, Lycone, team comp, rotations, whether you should play her as your main DPS or sub DPS, and her pros and cons. Do note that this is all subjected to changes, as this is just speculations. For this video, I won't be going through on how she works, but her whole kit is full of attacks. For her required Ascension trace materials, I'll just leave pictures down below as I don't know how to drag the video. If you're wondering if you should pull for her Eidolons, E0 plus Essential Lycone only if you don't have her Tar Lycone, or 4-star Superimpose 5 Lycones, E1 for additional damage, which is her best performance, highest DPS ratio for her whole kit, and follow-up buff for other DPS with 100% uptime. E1 plus Essential Lycone, her Lycone also buff her own damage and other DPS, just slightly lower numbers with crit rate boost, at also a 100% uptime. Due to her Tar Lycone only being behind around 10 to 20% compared to her Essential Lycone, I recommend E1 over her Essential Lycone. E2 plus her Tar Lycone is also alright. E2 plus Essential Lycone for energy regen, which gives her a way faster ulti uptime, 2 turns with Bronya, instant ulti, and Nambi goes really quickly. This gives her max value. The energy regen might not seem much, but actually helps a lot. In short, her E2 gives her a free energy regen rule. E4 plus Essential Lycone for extra speed. It scales down very heavily. E6 plus Essential Lycone for the max DPS, not worth it for something like E6. Price point for best value is, I recommend just her E1 over her Essential Lycone. For free to play, honestly, even though I know that E1 gives slightly more output, I would just pull for her Essential Lycone due to the design, unless you're a price to performance ratio guy. Though do note that she is E0 sufficient. How to build Topaz? Topaz can be your main or sub DPS. For both playstyles, there won't be any impact on your build, so you're still going to be building her the same way. It all comes down to how you're going to play her. For main DPS, you're going to be skill spamming. For sub DPS, you're going to be using her basic attack more compared to her skill. In short, skill points. Now for her main stat, for relics you want speed or attack boost depending on your team comp. Speed is actually preferred unless you have Bronya. Attack percentage also works well. For the body you want crit damage only. If you have Bronya, don't forget to speed tune. Subset priority, crit rate to 50 to 70% total crit rate including relic and Lycone. After that, focus on crit damage, attack percentage or speed to 134 or 135. Crit is really easy to get for Topaz. Onto her relic set, it's very straightforward. It just kind of depends on how you play Topaz. She has 2 best in slot. The first will be the 4-piece Firesmith of Lava Forging. Only if you're using Topaz as your main DPS, spamming her skill 100% of the time. Her second set is 2+2 with Musketeer, as it's easier to farm, especially even if you're not using Topaz skill all the time. This set will be around the same or maybe slightly higher compared to her fire set. This set is best for both DPS and sub DPS Topaz due to Nambi scaling on attack, and when you're playing Topaz, sometimes you may even want to play her as a sub DPS, so for that I recommend 2+2 set highly. Another set you can go for is 4-piece Genius of Brilliant Stars or 4-piece Musketeer. Well, I actually don't really recommend this set at all unless you're on a mono fire and you already have got their relic substat on either set. Still, this set will be her weakest. After all, you may be missing out on the extra 10% defense threat, and the bonus 4-piece from Musketeer set doesn't really help that much. Overall, if you have got their relic subset, then you can only go for this set. And now for the planet ornaments, means that you want attack percentage only. You don't really want energy regeneration rope, as she's going to be missing out on a ton of damage and her kit already gives energy regen. And for the op, you want fire damage. She has 2 planet ornament set. First is Inert Salsato, as her whole kit is follow-up attack, meaning you can get the extra 15% damage increase at a 100% uptime, even with Nambi. Plus that 8% crit rate is really useful. Her second best is Spacing Station. You can even opt to run this set, as with the 24% attack bonus, Topaz scales very well on attack. You're also getting 100% uptime on the bonus too. It all comes down to which has better substat, Inert Salsato being slightly better due to missing out on that 8% crit rate. Now for Topaz Lycone, I'll start from the worst to best. At last place we have only Silence Remains. Why last place is because this Lycone needs S5 for 32% attack, and the crit rate boost is pretty much non-existent due to having 3 to 5 enemies most of the time. Also, you kind of want to focus Topaz skill on the boss and not the minions. At third place we have Swordplay. Unless you have this Lycone at S5, it may be even better than her second best option. This Lycone is pretty good but not advisable if you plan on changing targets, as it will downscale a lot. Another issue is that with this Lycone you have to aim for higher crit rate substat. This Lycone will be good at S5 as you get a total of 80% damage boost when you're playing Topaz as your main DPS. Make sure to build speed on Topaz if you're using this Lycone, as you generate her max DPS output from this Lycone slightly faster. Second place is Cruising in the Stellar Sea from her task store, which is her best free-to-play Lycoon. At S5, it increases her crit rate by 16%, and enemies with 50% or lesser HP, you gain an additional 16% crit rate. In total, you gain 32% crit rate. Though the extra crit rate isn't that beneficial due to how much crit rate Topaz has already, this Lycoon will lose out to swordplay at S5 if you do not get the extra 40% attack increase, but it's easier to use this Lycoon, and 16% base crit rate does help out a lot. So for that, I'm placing this Lycoon at second place due to the crit rate buff and easier usage, which is not so restrictive as swordplay. This Lycoon loses to her signature Lycoon by 10 to 20% based on the activation proc for the extra 40% attack for 2 turns. First place no doubt is her signature Lycoon, which is the best. I speculate that it will be something like increase her crit rate by X percentage and damage from follow-up attacks by X percentage. When the wearer uses a follow-up attack, apply X state to the target, stacking up to X stacks. When allies hit enemies under the X state, every stack will increase crit damage received by X percentage, which is really beneficial for Topaz due to her whole kit being follow-up attack, and based on the text, it means that the follow-up attack boost only applies to Topaz, and the crit damage received buff will be for the whole team, as is a new sentence. Well, don't rush to pull for a Lycoon, do note that this is all speculation. And now for her team comp and rotations, I won't really be talking too much about sub-DPS Topaz team comps, as we will have to wait for better characters which synergize better with Topaz. Also, there are tons of DPS you can pull with her, which I won't be mentioning as I don't want to drag the video. I'll explain later, but her best one will be Clara plus Asta plus a sustain. You don't really want Ting Yun anymore due to not needing that energy regen, as follow-up attacks from Clara will speed up Nambi section, and Bronya too, due to the kill point issues. And Asta will be giving your whole team the attack buff instead of being a single unit buffer. Her highest DPS team comp will be Monofire with Asta or Himiko with Silverwolf plus a Quantum sustain. One of Topaz's best DPS budget team comp will be Bronya plus Tingyun or Asta, or just Tingyun plus Asta. You may be wondering why Bronya. Every DPS works great with Bronya, especially for getting that energy regen for Topaz, which allows her to ulti really quickly, Tingyun for that extra energy regen, and Asta with the attack buff and speed boost plus fire damage boost. Rotations for both DPS and sub-DPS Topaz, you want your buffers to go first before Topaz, after that your follow-up attack DPS lastly. Your healer can go anywhere you want as long as your follow-up DPS goes after Topaz. For Monofire rotations, it's pretty much the same. With Himiko, you want her to go after Topaz, your sustain to go second, as you need more skill points for both Topaz and Himiko to skill spam. With Asta, you want her to go first before Topaz. Your healer can go last since you don't really need that much skill point anymore. So should you play sub-DPS or hypercarry Topaz? Honestly, they are pretty much the same. There's no real difference between either. It just depends on the enemy weakness. If I have to say which is better, I would say that hypercarry Topaz is more preferred. You don't actually even need to build extra DPS just to put her with Topaz. Even without AoE sub-DPS, she's gonna clear MOC 10 totally fine as long as the boss is weak to fire. One downside to sub-DPS Topaz is, if your sub-DPS element isn't as the same as the boss, it scales down quite a bit compared to hypercarry DPS. Though not an issue since follow-up attack also triggers Nambi, so the main downside is honestly just building characters which may be outscaled in future, or you may only have to use them once in a while. One upside is, if the boss is not weak to fire and your sub-DPS matches the boss weakness, then sub-DPS Topaz team comp shines a lot more. Overall, it doesn't really matter, both are good in their own situation. Now for pros and cons. Pros, she's the best fire DPS and one of the highest DPS unit actually. She's a 2-1 buffer plus DPS, where in both scenarios she's really strong. She's free to play friendly, easy to build, universal unit as long as you have a follow-up DPS which matches the same element to enemies or have fire weakness already. Maybe a good investment unit like Silverwolf, good design. Last and foremost, you can literally just bring her into your team if the boss have fire weakness and she doesn't really lose out on damage, which I find that really good about her, as she can be skill point positive with your main DPS even if you do not have Silverwolf etc. Though in this scenario, better to have a buffer which can do team-wide buffs. Cons, she may be more of like an additional DPS character to use only when the boss are weak to fire. Same problem with all DPS actually. Her archetype isn't really needed. She will need better units in future which synergize better with her. Though don't get me wrong, as a sub-DPS, she's definitely really strong. She may not be free to play friendly as you need to cover for elemental weakness, which means you may have to build more units as she's not as universal as Silverwolf. 50% and above of her gameplay is Nambi's. Clara may be outperformed in future. And that's it for this guide.